2 Corinthians. It's chapter 5, verses 1 through 7. I'm reading this morning from the NIV translation. So 2 Corinthians 5, 1 through 7. For we know that if the earthly tent we live in is destroyed, we have a building from God, an eternal house in heaven, not built by human hands. Meanwhile, we groan, longing to be clothed instead with our heavenly dwelling, because when we are clothed, we will not be found naked. For while we are in this tent, we groan and are burdened, because we do not wish to be unclothed, but to be clothed instead with our heavenly dwelling, so that what is mortal may be swallowed up by life. Now the one who has fashioned us for this very purpose is God, who has given us the Spirit as a deposit, guaranteed what is to come. Therefore, we are always confident and know that as long as we are at home in the body, we are away from the Lord, for we live by faith and not by sight. The word of God for the people of God.
Thanks be to God.
My friends, all of us that are here today have chosen to follow Jesus on a journey of faith. In Paul's second letter to the Corinthians, he tells them that we live, that we walk by faith and not by sight. In the Pew Bibles, the Good News translation, it actually translates that verse as, for our life is a matter of faith and not of sight. My personal journey of faith has taken a change in direction this week as I've been called upon to serve here. And it's an honor to have that call, and I will do to the best of my abilities. 4 weeks ago, I did not know this was going to happen. 20 years ago, it would have been laughable for me to think that I would ever be standing in a pulpit. And unlike where I just came from, there are some of you that have known me for over 20 years, so you may be laughing as well, or in shock. A former pastor of mine said, if you want to make God laugh, tell him your plans. If you want to make God laugh, tell him your plans. Today, I'm going to share with you a lot about my call story, the story of how I came to be a pastor and your pastor. But let me say that I stand here in your pulpit, in Christ's pulpit, in awe and in reverence of all that it stands for. The pulpit is a place to tell the good news of the gospel message. And while I will naturally, in the coming weeks and months, be sharing with you from my life experiences as they apply to the gospel message, I have to confess that I'm not exactly comfortable standing in a pulpit talking about me. That's just not quite comfortable, because I know this pulpit and all that it stands for is not about me, okay? But in the spirit of fellowship, there's an expectation that the new pastors share their stories. So I will do that with you this morning. Forgive me if I run a little long. I'll do better next week. I'll share with you some of my strengths and my weaknesses, the ones that I know about. I know there are probably many others. As we begin working on the tasks that Christ has called us to do. And I'll tell you first thing, we're talking about strengths and weaknesses. My number one weakness that you will know is that I am terrible with names. I am horrible with names. I've already gone through your 2016 directory and started trying to learn names and faces, and I'm going to work on getting some updated pictures so that I can do some homework. So please bear with me. It may take me several weeks to get the names down. In my professional career, I worked first as a computer programmer for the University of Georgia, and then I worked for the Visiting Nurses Association up the street for the last 38 years. Most of that time I served as their chief financial officer. Professionally, my background strengths are in administration, accounting, budgeting, finance, all that boring stuff. HR law, that's even more boring. But that's where a lot of my skill sets are. As far as hobbies, they vary widely, and Holly may tell you from week to week. I love music. I love music. I like playing the guitar and singing, although I'm not particularly gifted in either category. I still like to do it. I love to play golf. There was a time I was pretty halfway decent at it. Now I just try to play. I'm no longer worried about the scoring part. I just try to have fun. I've always been competitive. I competed not only in golf tournaments, but in chess tournaments, baseball and basketball team tournaments, various card tournaments, you know, the Yu-Gi-Oh! And the Magic the Gathering and that kind of thing with the kids. I love offshore saltwater fishing. And I have a love-hate relationship with a saltwater aquarium in my house. Today we're tending more towards the hate side. It needs some attention that I haven't had time to give it. I was born in Goldsboro, North Carolina. My family originates, if you know the area, from the rural communities around it, mainly Dudley and Mount Olive. My father was in the Air Force, and then after the war he was in the textiles industry. So if you know anything about either one, we moved around a lot. I did 13 different schools in 12 years. In those years, as we moved around, we didn't really have a regular church life, because by the time we got into the community and kind of learned our way around, it was time to move again. So, as I entered high school, I had what I would have called a Sunday school kind of knowledge of scriptures. So when my 10th grade biology teacher taught us the theory of evolution, and he laughed off the Bible's creation story and everything else in the Bible for that matter, my faith was shattered. I was crushed. I saw this man as an authority figure. I didn't have the scriptural knowledge of the background to challenge him. Something inside me told me that what he was telling me wasn't quite right. But it was going to take a little while for God to work on me. In 1984, a few years after this, I started working on my degrees. I got an associate degree in computer science. I think I mentioned already I worked as a programmer at the University of Georgia for a couple of years. He came up here. When I moved up here, I first actually purchased a house out at Holmes Bridge. So I was a neighbor to some of you. I was there for 3 or 4 years until we purchased our home on Carlisle Street in Danville. While I was at the B&A, I wanted more than an associate degree, so I started attending night school. It was the only way I could get it back then. We didn't have internet college like we do now. So I took courses from Southern Wesleyan University, and I got a bachelor's degree in HR management and a master's degree in organizational management. Somewhere along the way, I married my wonderful wife, Holly, who's hiding here in the background. She's a nurse practitioner. She's been serving at Bama Family Practice for several years now. And in the coming weeks, we'll be taking up a new position. We have 2 sons. They both attended Winfield. Our oldest son is named Jamie. I gave him the curse. He's the 4th. He's assured me there won't be a 5th. I don't know why. He earned a bachelor's degree in English at Winthrop. He got a scholarship to Kennesaw State and got a master's in creative writing. And all through his childhood, and some of you may know this story, all he wanted to do was play video games. Not football, baseball, basketball, golf. He wanted to play video games. I kept telling him, man, you need to find something more productive to do with your time. You need to develop some skills that matter. Well, he obviously ignored me and proved me wrong. He's been working in the video gaming industry his entire career. He started off as an editor for GameStop's magazine, Game Informer. He worked with a PR firm that helped gaming companies. And in January, he accepted a job at EA Games, who I think is the largest of the gaming companies. And unfortunately for me and his mother, he's in Minneapolis now, which is far enough away, but in a few weeks he'll be moving to Los Angeles. Our youngest son, Sloan, also graduated from Winthrop with a degree in biology. But by his junior year, this ain't for me, you know. He didn't want to work in that field. And so we encouraged him to at least finish your degree, because he'd already got an interest in computer programming and was learning on his own through internet tutorials and that kind of thing. And having been a computer programmer myself, being the great dad that I am, I tried to steer into something else again. And fortunately, like his older brother, he ignored me, and I'm glad that he did. He's now living in Arlington, Virginia, and he writes software and maintains software for the U.S. Marshals Service. So, if you come to me and ask for advice, I'm 0 for 2 with my own children, for what it's worth.
And I have knocked my cane over.
Lost my name badge. That's okay. My first day at Pentecost, I had to go down for the children's sermon, and I came back up, and I wasn't used to wearing dresses. And they had like 3 or 4 steps, and I got up, and the second step, I tripped over my dress, and the only thing that saved me from face planting was the communion table. I landed on the communion table. So, anyway, I don't know how I got on that tangent. That's why I write this stuff out, so I don't get on these tangents. Getting back to my faith journey. My faith had been crushed by a 10th grade biology teacher. During the time that I took classes at Southern Wesleyan University, they made me take some Bible classes. And during one of these classes, I shared with the professor this story of my biology teacher. And he told me it is wonderful when people grow and have childlike faith. He says that's a wonderful thing, but not everybody is cut out that way. He told me that and assured me that for people that have more analytical or more scientific minds, he said there's ample evidence left behind by Jesus and the apostles and the early church that overwhelmingly show that Jesus is exactly who he claimed to be. And that professor introduced me to the study of apologetics. Now that's a word I didn't know. So if you don't know apologetics, it means the study of the defense of the faith. It's to be able to answer questions from atheists and non-believers who challenge our belief system. He introduced me to my first little books, little teen primer books written by Paul Little. Know what you believe and know why you believe. Then I studied C.S. Lewis's Mere Christianity, and Lee Strobel's The Case for Christ, and many others. And through that study, I came to agree with the professor that the evidence was overwhelming if you looked at it, that Christ is precisely who he and who the scriptures proclaim him to be. So my journey of faith had begun again. It had begun anew. I didn't mention Holly and I attended Trinity in Bamboo. We attended there for about 30 years, and one Sunday morning in 2006, a Gideon came and gave a Gideon presentation. And really, probably for the first time in my life, the Spirit strongly urged me to do something. It urged me to become a part of that organization. And I did, and I was blessed through them to be able to give their reports to the several churches of many different denominations all in the area. I served for 10 years. I love the Gideons, still do. But they are a lay organization, so my reward for becoming a pastor is they kicked me out. No, they still love me. I still sneak into some of the meetings sometimes, but really, my only regret as a pastor is no longer serving the Gideons. During this same time period, the Spirit started working on me and led me to start studying the scriptures. Didn't bother to tell me why. But it pushed me to go past that Sunday school knowledge into what Paul would have called spiritual maturity. Eventually, at Trinity, our lay speaker, I'm looking for hours and I can't find her. Oh, okay. That's good, because I'm sleeping. Okay, anyway, our lay person was retired and then moved to Florida. So the pastors asked me if I would become a lay leader, and then I went and took the lay servant ministry classes. And I took them as quickly as I could get them. It worked out pretty good because they were having them here, and they'd also have them Sloan's at Winthrop, so I could double up and go spend the weekend with Sloan and take the class. So I got through the courses very quickly. In 2014, my faith journey had another very slight detour. Have any of you ever been on the walk to Emmaus? The walk to Emmaus, the pilgrimage to Emmaus, was one of the most powerful spiritual experiences I've ever had, and would encourage anyone if they get the opportunity to do that. And then my journey of faith took a life-changing moment on Sunday morning, February 22nd, 2015. I was taking the lay servant ministry, the preaching class at that time. And I got into this textbooks, and one of the things you're going to learn very shortly, if not today, is that the big pastor up here has a big heart and he will cry in a heartbeat. Okay? So just be prepared. Something in this book, they set up a scenario in this preaching book that just cut through me like a knife, had tears coming out of me. It upset me so greatly I threw the book down. And I had an experience, powerful personal experience that I will share with you on a different Sunday when you trust me a little more and don't think I'm totally crazy. But I had a spiritual experience, and suffice it to say that the Lord in His own way told me that we are all created for His purposes. That He will equip and He will prepare us and He will be with us as we work towards His purposes. Literally, 2 days later, I get a phone call. Does everyone here know Reverend Frederick Uboa? Used to be our district superintendent. Well, I had seen him. He had come and preached at our church, but I didn't know him. Never had talked to him. He called me up at work and wanted to come and see me. What? Called my pastors up. You know anything about this? They didn't know anything about it. So he comes to me that afternoon. Like I said, never talked to him. He sat down at my table at the Visiting Nurses Association and asked me to consider filling in as a pastor because there was some church somewhere out in Coke Cordova area where a pastor had unexpectedly passed away. And I was simply stunned. Where did he get my name from? I didn't feel worthy or capable of such a task. He told me to go home and pray over it. I went home and Holly and I prayed over it, and it didn't feel right. I didn't feel qualified. And so I went back to Brother Frederick, and I told him, look, this doesn't feel right to me. However, if you don't have any other options, I won't let your pulpit be empty. I will go to the best of my ability serve. Well, the next day, a retired pastor contacted him moving into the area and was given that charge. And then I was convicted powerfully. The Spirit had been telling me to get prepared, and I wasn't. A couple of days later, my pastors came over. We had a husband and wife team for pastors then, and they started me the paperwork to attend the pastoral school of ministry. The Lord had been nudging me along this path for a long time, and I had resisted this path less traveled for a long time. I resisted it hard. I never thought of being here where I'm standing. But there comes a time, if if you've ever resisted the Spirit, there comes a time when it's pointless. You may as well give in because you won't get any rest. See, Trinity, I was comfortable. I was very comfortable with Trinity. I called myself, I was the fill-in guy. When the Sunday school teacher couldn't make it, I filled in for the Sunday school teacher. When the sound and the video person couldn't be there, I filled in for them. If we had a guest speaker, I'd do the liturgy. And if the pastors needed time off, I'd do the sermon. I was comfortable. The road, if you don't know, the road to becoming a local pastor in our denomination is lengthy. You go through a lot of vetting. The process takes anywhere from 8 to 12 months. And I was finally offered admission to attend pastoral school of ministry in May 2017. I did not go looking for an appointment. I had more than a full-time job. I just wanted to be prepared if I ever got that call again. I didn't want to be convicted because I wasn't competent. So I finished the school, and I meant to bring my certificate, and I forgot it. But when you finish, you get a certificate. You know, you have completed the school of ministry, And it's got a place on the back of it for signatures. And if you get appointed, the district superintendent signs the back of it, tells where you're appointed and the dates, and your certificate becomes your license. If you're not appointed, you turn it back into the district superintendent so he knows who's available. Let's finish the process. Well, I made several copies for all that hard work. And I went a couple of days later to Brother Frederick's office. That's the old district office up by the old hospital. And was turning it in, and he starts apologizing to me. He's Rudy, I am so sorry. I do not have an appointment for you. And I'm just like, huh? But we talked about this. You knew I wasn't looking for an appointment. I wanted to be qualified in case there was ever a need again. I said, my friends, my new friends, be careful what you say. And be especially careful what you say to a district superintendent. Because I'm sitting on that little couch and he stands up. And he says, well, I have this friend named Stephen Love. He's got a couple of churches outside of Aiken that need a pastor, I think. I know they got a parsonage. I don't know all the details, but would you be willing to talk to him? Okay. Sure, I'll talk to him. Have you ever felt like you were being set up before? He picks out of his pocket one of these little phones, one of these that flip up. He presses 2 numbers and it starts ringing. Stephen Love answers the other end of it. See, it turns out, as I learned later, that when Stephen Love was a young man, Brother Frederick was his pastor. They were tight. I didn't know this when he started the phone conversation, and what I failed to mention is during my vetting process, Brother Frederick came to hear me give a sermon on Sunday at Trinity. And so he gets on the phone and he asks him, yeah, you still got that need? And he said, yeah, well, look, I got this young man I told you about. He's sitting right here with me. You might want to talk to him. I listened to him, and he was fabulous. He was magnificent. He was the next Billy Graham. I'm going. I'm like, he lied. He lied. Anyway, we made arrangements. I met him the next day. 2 or 3 days later, I was appointed to go and serve at those 2 churches. I served there 5 years. They were very loving congregations. I would have never left if they waited for me to ask to leave. The bond was that strong. I had already started moving more stuff into the parsonage because they were going to move me to 3/4 time, and Dr. Love called me and asked me if I would speak to Ken Nelson about a possible move. Now, I don't know Ken Nelson very well either, but I knew he was the bishop's right-hand man. And he had to talk to Dr. Nelson. And so he called and we talked over several phone calls. And finally he decided that he wanted to make the move. My other two churches had been covered. And he called me one last time. He said, Rudy, he says, I'm concerned about this. He says, I've talked to Stephen and I've talked to you, and neither one of you seem very excited about this. And I said, well, I said, you're asking me to leave a place that I've served for 5 years for people that dearly love me and that I dearly love. Don't take this wrong. You know, if this is what's best for the church, you make the appointment and I will come. But I will be heartbroken, at least until that first Sunday when I got there. See, I had to get through last Sunday like y'all had to get through last Sunday. Y'all had your pastor for 8 years, and I know he'd been through a lot. So, and he left me the most kind note, saying that he hoped I had half the love and enjoyment from you guys because y'all are awesome. He didn't use the word awesome, that's my word, but that was paraphrased. All right, I've been long-winded. I will not be long-winded in the future, but I felt like you needed to hear some of this story because we're going to be in fellowship with each other. And most all of you know each other and you don't know me. So I wanted to share a little bit of that story. And I wanted to share with you that sometimes our walk of faith carries us to unexpected places. Sometimes it calls us to do things that are not comfortable, that are inconvenient, that are challenging, and in some cases downright scary. But you know what? If you think about it, it wasn't convenient for those 12 men that Jesus walked up to and said, follow me. They had to give up everything in their lives to follow him. Did they receive fame and fortune for their efforts? Hardly. One of them became a traitor and committed suicide. 10 were martyred, terrible deaths. Only one, after a hard life, lived to die peacefully in old age. As we prepare to celebrate Independence Day tomorrow, let's also remember that 56 delegates from the Second Continental Congress did a very inconvenient thing by signing the Declaration of Independence. I'm sorry our young man isn't in here to make sure all my facts are straight this morning. But they took a step of faith to declare independence from England. They wrote, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal by the Creator. They're endowed with certain unalienable rights, among these life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness. We all had to memorize these words in school. What they didn't tell me in school was that these men were in effect signing their own death warrants. Because putting their name on a document that the King of England was going to consider high treason was not wise. It wasn't convenient. 5 of the signers were captured and tortured to death. 9 others were killed in the battles in the war. At least a dozen more had their homes and all their possessions destroyed. But these men stepped out on faith, endeavoring to create one nation under God. I repeat, sometimes the call of God is not convenient. Today we begin a new chapter in the long, blessed history of Bethel Park United Methodist Church. Each one of you here has special gifts and talents bestowed upon you by your Creator. He intends for us to develop and to use those gifts in service to Him and in service to mankind. And I encourage everyone to ask the Holy Spirit to help them to develop and use those God-given abilities that you all have. You know, before I was even officially your pastor, I went to a meeting with the PPRC. They told me you had 0 children. And they told me they were running a vacation Bible school with about 130 kids. Okay, what? 130? Okay, the next day I went out there. I needed to see this. I wasn't even official. I went to see it. This McCain drove me around all the little places and into the schoolrooms, and I had a Sunday school lesson. It was wonderful. Wonderful. Before I was officially your pastor, I went with your outreach team to Grace Residential Care Facility. I watched your team bring happiness. I forgot to count, but some 20 or 25 residents that were there. At the nursing homes, we sang and had a devotional. We ate ice cream and cake. Holly's here. Scratch the ice cream. I learned while I was there that you built the outdoor facility that they were using. You poured the concrete. You built the structure. Had power and lights and ceiling fans put in it so that they would have a place to gather because their square footage there was very limited. I learned that your men and women's group are going to be feeding a Salkehatchie group that, as best I can tell, is an hour away from here. You have a calendar full of things that you do in sharing your love for Christ. You were a church in mission long, long, long before I was ever called to come. I'm excited. I'm thrilled about the opportunity of serving in mission with all of you. I only hope I can keep up. I can't believe everything that you're already doing. All of you have already stood up like Isaiah. You've said, "Here I am, Lord. Here I am." You've taken that step of faith. So our task is to share Christ to a lost world, to make disciples for of Jesus Christ for the transformation of the world. We are all on a journey of faith, and I am finally about to close. Martin Luther King Jr. once said, "Faith is taking the first step, even when you don't see the whole staircase." As I shared with my first congregation on my first day as a pastor, I'll share with you now, I do not pretend to see the whole staircase. I freely confess that I am far from perfect. Please know that I'm going to make many mistakes along the way. I ask that you bear with me. It's because the Lord isn't finished with me yet, just like He's not finished with any of us yet. No matter how many times I slip up, no matter how many mistakes I make, there's one thing I will tell you today that you can count on. You can count on the fact that you have my love. You can count on that fact, and because of that, know that I will do everything that I can with the gifts, the talents, and the many imperfections that I have